Welcome to the podcast, Nerds and Friends. Today we have author J.S. Willis joining us. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really excited to have you on today. And let's just dive in. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your writing, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'm an author from Ohio. I write fantasy. I primarily write fantasy. I dabble in some other stuff, but I've always been a fantasy writer. Got a background in Dungeons and Dragons. Played that since I was in high school since back in 1985. That's writing is my passion. I wish it was my full-time job, but it's not. One of these days, maybe it will be. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's what I'm working towards as well. I can finally let the day job go and go into writing full time. That's the dream.
Yep.
I got to ask, above your right shoulder, is that a Dharma Initiative symbol on the wall?
No, actually.
No, it looks like the symbol from Lost.
It's very similar. That is actually a paper cutting that a friend of for me back right before my wedding.
Cool.
My roommate, he got that for me. It looks like a Dharma Initiative symbol. Now that you say that.
Yeah, I was like, is he a fellow Lost fan? Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I watched all of it.
Oh, me too. Yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, real quick, my co-host is messaging me. Let me tell him to come on.
Sure.
Yeah, come join us. Sorry, I can't talk and type at the same time unless I repeat myself. But yeah, good. So
no
my buddy Will would join us. He's also an avid D&D player, and he's
Right.
he's actually an artist and illustrator who did the cover for my most latest book. So
Oh, nice.
yeah. No, and speaking of book covers, looking at your books, I'd love your covers, especially for the Sphere Saga. I want to hear more about what that saga is about, so our listeners can get excited and go buy some copies.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. The Sphere Saga. That's my baby. That's my epic fantasy series. I've completed the first trilogy in that.
Nice.
One I've been working toward since I've been writing my entire life. I mean, that's what I always wanted to write, was an epic fantasy series. The Sphere Saga starts off with Dream of the Sphere, is the first book in the series. It's I tell people it's about war criminals, family drama, and a magical apocalypse. So you get a whole range in the first three books. The first book is set 3,000 years after there's a magical apocalypse. The second book, I'll go back and talk about the first book in a second. The second book is set during and just before the magical apocalypse, and you get to know about the three wizard war criminals as they're labeled throughout history, and find out why things happen the way they happen and how they brought this magic apocalypse and almost destroyed their world. And then the third book picks up the first book leaves off. So it's a little bit out of order, kind of like the Star Wars trilogy.
I was about to say, it sounds like Star Wars. Yeah, I love that.
I'm a Star Wars kid. I grew up watching Star Wars in the theaters when they came out, and
nice.
That's a lot of my background. So yeah, I took a little bit of a cue there from the way the Star Wars trilogies were set up, going back in time and in the middle and exploring the history of the characters and how the universe got to be in the mess that it became.
Yeah.
The first book, it deals with it's almost a post-apocalyptic fantasy setting. After this society has decided that they're going to suppress magic after this apocalypse, and they develop over time this society that's a theocratic society, and they want to suppress magic, and basically they stall and hold back progress. Their government intentionally keeps society from advancing to the levels that they were before they keep magic away. The name of the series, the Sphere Saga, comes from the Sphere, which is this humongous artifact that they build to help them suppress magic and keep magic out of their world. Time that starts to falter. That's where Dream of the Sphere picks up. Magic is starting to try to seep back into the world. The sphere is starting to not function the way it used to, and the characters are dealing with the ramifications of that and trying to figure out what to do, and whether or not magic should be brought back into the world.
That's cool. So you have this existential debate of, is our society better off with this power or without it, kind of, it sounds like.
Exactly.
Ooh, that sounds really good. I got goosebumps. That sounds really cool. I like epic fantasy is what I write too, so I love that. That sounds like a really fun story.
Yeah, Wheel of Time, Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series, Stormlight Archive, all those, those are my those are my background. That's the stuff I like to read.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. Well, hello there, Will. This is my co-host, Will, joining us. Will, this is
Hey,
Jay.
Will. Hi.
Jay,
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
good to meet you too.
We were just talking about epic fantasy, Will, and the awesome Sphere Saga that Jay here has written. That sounds really, really neat. And yeah, let's pivot off of that. How does Dungeons and Dragons, which is our favorite game to play over here on Nerds and Friends, how has that influenced and inspired your writing? I wanted to ask you.
Almost definitely. I don't even know anymore that I could pinpoint specifics because it's so ingrained in my brain. I've been playing since I was in high school, since 1985, and magic has always been a fascination of mine. My D&D character was a magic user, the old red box set. We didn't have wizards back then. We had MUs. And I always tend to play, wizards of some kind or some kind of magic using character when I play. And my fantasy tends to usually involve some kind of magic in some way, shape, or form. Brandon Sanderson's the master of magic systems, but I think other people can lend to that conversation, and I'm hoping one of these days I'll be considered one of them. So I firmly believe necromancy does not have to be evil. And I think that.
That's a good hill to die on.
No, I agree. I actually have been playing a non-evil necromancer cleric in one of our campaigns. I think necromancy and blood magic, for some reason, always get a bad rap for
They do.
Nobody ever explains why it's bad. They're just like, these are the evil magics.
Exactly. And that's what people say, well, you shouldn't have favorite characters, you shouldn't have favorite books if you write, but I do, and I can't help that. Yeah, my Sphere Saga, the second book, is actually my favorite, Dawn of the Sphere, because like I was telling Josh at the beginning here, it explores the three wizard war criminals as they're labeled throughout history and how they bring about the magical apocalypse in my series. And one of those characters, his name is Vrom, and he's very different than everyone else. And he gravitates toward necromancy, but not for a reason you normally see necromancers doing that. He's actually a physician. He's a magical physician, and he gravitates toward necromancy. And throughout the series, that's just the direction he heads because it makes the most sense for him. And he discovers a society that's kind of hidden off in the north of this world, and they don't see necromancy as evil either. I mean, it's based around different morals and different ideas of what death is and what happens after you die, and it's just not, raising skeletons to serve you is not something that is evil in their culture, and he takes up with that, and if you read the book, it makes more sense. It's not just he's going out and digging up graves, although he does that at some point in his career as a physician, because he wants to experiment and conduct experiments in his lab that he's not allowed to because their laws prevent it at that time.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because, like, when I was making my necromancer cleric character, like, something that kind of stuck in my head, and I went that same route of him being like, he's like a physician and he studies this as like a healing type of deal. Exactly. And like the joke that my sister's a doctor, and she once told me this joke of all bleeding stops eventually.
Yeah, there you go.
Which I kind of put as like the thesis of that character, of like, yeah, he's not bothered by death. He's not bothered by like what's okay magic and what's not okay magic. No, he's just concerned with like what he's doing and like the knowledge that he is gaining from this.
Right. Yeah, necromancers are just healers that are a little bit late to the game. But yeah, my magic system in that series, as I developed it, I kind of developed it with that in mind. I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but basically magic is life in that world that I write in, and literally magic is life. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. But that's Vrom explores those ideas, and and when he summons an army of skeletons, he's not grave robbing to do it. He's actually calling upon the ancestors of the people that he's become part of, the culture he's become a part of, and the pact with the spirits of these ancestors to come and join him and help in their battles.
That's cool.
I think it's a different take on it.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting take. Kind of I think it's Taoist that has the ancestor worship, if I recall.
Yeah, that's we were talking about the Dharma Initiative symbol, which is not actually a Dharma Initiative symbol. But that's Taoism, balance. I'm all about all that.
That's awesome.
So when you're developing a magic system like that, how much of that did you plan out before you started writing, and how much is just kind of developed as part of the plot there?
A lot of it developed as part of the plot. I knew that magic was the key to this world that I was writing in, because I mean, like I said, there was a magic apocalypse, and that's the whole setting of the series. Is what happens that when people try to banish magic from their world, and 3,000 years later, what happens when magic won't be denied, because magic is life and life will prevail. Therefore, will prevail, and magic will find a way to come back into their world eventually. So basically, that's, I would say my systems grow organically as the plot develops. But I had a lot of these ideas and concepts in mind at the beginning. But as the plot developed, and sometimes the characters just take over, and things just start growing from there, then you have to start redefining your rules a little bit if it's necessary. And that's the way I work.
That's awesome. So it sounds like, but do you do an outline? Are you more of a plotter or a pantser? Or?
I outline to a certain degree, but I like to look at it as more of a broad view, a macroscopic outline. I like to outline events. I was a history major and political science major in college, so I have timelines. So I kind of outline the events, knowing where things are starting, where they're going, and then from the larger scope events, I tend to be more of a pantser and discovery writer, letting my characters kind of go off on their own tangents and get from point A to point B to point C. And then if the outline needs to change from stupid things that they do in between there, like any D&D campaign goes off the rails, writing kind of the same way. Sometimes your characters take you in directions that you didn't see coming. So then you just have to reorient and adjust the outline accordingly.
That sounds like a really balanced approach. I like that.
Yeah, it works. It works for me.
That's awesome.
As a political science major, do you find yourself like pulling a lot from like historical events and history when you're making these plots?
Oh yeah, I'm also an attorney. Don't hold that against me.
My dad's an attorney, so that's awesome.
So history, political science, law school, all that stuff. I also had a third major in religion. So you tie all history, politics, and religion together, it's a deadly combination. And I kind of focused in college. I focused in the medieval area. Imagine that. Focusing on the medieval era. No, I actually did. One of my favorite professors in college actually let me do an independent study on the history of real world magic, and my advisor was aghast at the whole thing, but he just rolled his eyes and signed off on it. so yeah, that was fun. So yeah, I've got a lot of background in magic. So
that's really cool. That's awesome.
That is interesting. What influences, as far as like making the magic system, did you pull from any existing sources, or is this more of just your own thing that you've kind of created?
Well, as far as real world, I mean, I did that history of magic independent study where basically there's this, I can't remember when he wrote this. I think it was an author by the name of Charles Lee, LEA, wrote a history of magic series, nonfiction series back in the early part of the 20th century. And I took a lot of those books and sections of those books and looked back to Seneca, Galen, Ptolemy, all these ancient philosophers and writers, looked at sympathetic magic and those kinds of things. Bacon, looked at all of these guys, different and writings, alchemy, the Kabbalah, Kabbalists. There are things that they labeled science as magic back in ancient times, and that's anything you don't understand you call magic. Anything you do understand you tend to call science. So and that plays a large part in developing my magic systems too. And then of course you have the reading fantasy all my life and playing Dungeons and Dragons. All plays into developing the magic systems that I tend to use in my books.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That's really cool. Well, I was going to ask, not to focus too much on this, but how is your day job as an attorney? How has that influenced your writing? Because I know when I was in college, I took some pre-law classes just because I was thinking about doing what my dad did and going to law school. And so I've found that it helps me really be clear and concise in my writing and make sure that I get my point across to the audience. I was wondering what your experience is with that.
It's a very different type of writing. So it's interesting because I do a lot of appellate work, and I work as an assistant prosecutor now in a prosecuting attorney's office, and I do a lot of I do most of our appellate work, which is a different type of writing, style of writing, and it's definitely different than creative writing. At work, I'm doing left brain function writing, and then I come home and I've got to switch that off and turn on the right side to actually do the writing that I really love and write fantasy. So, the two, I mean, again, it's finding balance. They're working within the government and knowing the governmental settings and how laws interplay with one another, and that it helps me set up my governmental structures in my books and it helps me in world building. It's that's the biggest advantage that I've got from my law school education is it helps with my writing.
That's awesome.
I gotta imagine that's got to be kind of a big shift trying to go from because law writing is all about being concise and precise with your language
and persuasive.
Whereas if you're trying to actually write a novel, it's about making things clear to the reader and digestible.
Right. Yeah. It's a switch. You definitely have to shift gears, but it keeps me sane. So
yeah. I was going to ask, balancing that much writing in your life, what's your kind of writing routine? You mentioned you come home from work and you write creatively. Do you also write on the weekends, or do you give yourself time off? I was just curious about that.
Yeah, now that my kids are older, I got one graduating from college this year, one graduating from high school this year.
Congrats.
I'm getting more time to myself, and I'm able to spend more time on the weekends writing, and trying to keep caught up on that kind of thing. Since my one's in college and the other one's driving himself to extracurricular activities now, I'll have more time. So I tend to come home from work and try to shift into writing mode as soon as I get home, if I can, before I get too burned out. I usually won't, unfortunately, during the week, I won't get a whole lot done. More than if I get 1,000 words, I'm ecstatic.
That's a solid goal though per day. If you're coming home from a full work day.
If I get that much done, some days I don't. Some days I don't write at all because it's just not. I just don't have time.
Yeah.
But I'll spend a lot of time on a Saturday morning and Sunday morning getting some work done, getting some writing done.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so with your book series right now, the Sphere Saga, you're up to 4 books now, right?
Actually, there's 3 in the trilogy. I have a prequel novella that I wrote that's available I get that away to free for anybody who subscribes to the newsletter. It's a prequel to book 2, so it's actually set right before the events that happen in the second book happen. And I'm currently writing on the 4th book. So I'm outlining the second trilogy, and I'm writing on the 4th book, which is the first book of that second trilogy, at the same time that I'm outlining it, which sounds kind of crazy, but I couldn't wait.
Nice.
And I couldn't wait to get back in and start back with it because I miss my characters in my world. So planning and writing at the same time.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That was actually going to be my question of how far ahead do you plan for this? Before you wrote the first book, did you have an overarching plot for the whole series, or just for that first trilogy, or was it really just like that first book and then that kind of sparked the rest?
When I started writing the first book, I knew where the first book was going, and I wasn't sure from there how far out it was going to go. As I wrote it, I would stop, and as ideas would keep coming, and again, my characters would do stupid things. So I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. Let's go with that and see what happens. So then I would add that into my outline, and then just extrapolate my outline from there. So the first book took a long time. To make a very long story short, I discovered in the writing of that first book, after many, many drafts, that I wasn't up to par with my skills. My writing craft wasn't able to take care of an epic fantasy like I wanted. So I kind of put that on the back burner, wrote another couple books that weren't epic fantasy, and also help from a developmental editor, had him look at my stuff and had him give me some ideas and some suggestions. So then I came back to it. And when I came back to it, then I went back to the outline before I started into it. And I had sat on that book for so long, so many different ideas had come about, and I kind of had the series planned out, at least the first 3 books planned out. I knew where it was going. I knew the background. I knew how I was going to get all the way through it. And all those characters had developed in my head. So then I just put it down. The pandemic and lockdown was actually the best thing that happened to my writing series, because I had several complete drafts of the first book done. I had about half to 60% of the second book written, at least the first draft, and I had part of the third book drafted. So during the pandemic, when I was locked down, couldn't leave the house, I just dove into it, and I kind of a weird thing. I kind of wrote all 3 at the same time. I finished off and revised the first draft, the first complete real draft that was worth anything on the first book. I said, hey, I think this is done and ready to send to a copy editor. So I did that. And then I started back on the second book and worked on the second book, got it finished up, went straight into the third book, got my edits back on the first book, and just kind of bounced back and forth between them. And then ultimately went back to book 1 and put in all the things that I needed to tweak as far as foreshadowing into the second, second to the first book, and from the first book to the third book. It's an epic fantasy. It's confusing as hell. I mean, you've got plot lines all over the place, and you've got all kinds of point of view characters. But that's how the pandemic gave me the time and ability to concentrate on getting those 3 books together.
Yeah.
But that's the way that those organically came together.
That's kind of fascinating. So you're like at I lost count there. So this would be what, 4 revisions of that first book by the time that you actually...
There's more than that. I don't know. I lost count. I could go back through my OneDrive and look and see how many different versions there are, and I don't know that I really want to do.
I understand. So is that kind of like your process where you make you just keep going back until you decide it's done, or because I know a lot of people tend to be a bit different, of like wanting to revise things constantly versus just going.
Yeah, it's changed over the years, and I've gotten to the point where my skills have progressed, so I'm not doing as many revisions as I used to in the book. And I think part of that was I was afraid it had to be perfect, and I got that. It took me a long time, but I got over the idea that it had to be perfect. Now it's just the story has to be complete. Whatever shape that is, the story has to be complete. So now my writing's changed a little bit, and the way I'm working now is I do tend to write in more of a linear fashion, because that's just my brain is more ordered. That's the outliner in me. So I don't like write one scene and then skip 6 chapters ahead. Usually I tend, because my pacing gets all screwed if I do that. So I write each chapter in sequence. And that's the way I'm working now. So I've got the first 2 chapters of the new book done. And not that they won't be revised again. They will. I'll go through several revisions, just going back and cleaning things up. But story wise, those first 2 chapters are done, and I'm in the middle of the 3rd chapter now. And the way I'll write it is I will start, and then I'll get to the end of the day or whatever, and then when I come back to it, I start up at the top again, read through it again. So I kind of built in that Dean Wesley Smith idea of your revisions happen as you're writing, and it's actually working out a lot better for me because I'm able to get a cleaner draft on that manuscript quicker now. It's improved my writing speed, I think. I hope.
Oh, that's great. I know for me as a writer, like revisions are the thing that scare me the most. I feel like once I have a good draft that I like, I feel like if I go back and change things, that I'll forget to change other things to make it have continuity. And I like psych myself out,
Right. Yeah. That's a danger.
Yeah.
Which, as I'm not a writer, but I am an artist. And like, I remember like kind of your process of learning to build those skills kind of reminds me of like my journey as an artist, where once upon a time I was afraid to have to redraw anything because like in my head I didn't know if I had the actual skill to do this again. Like
Exactly.
It always felt like, okay, I was lucky enough to come out with this in the first place, and then here however many years later I'm just like, oh, I messed that up, all right, I'll draw it again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can't. They're not. It's not etched in stone. You can delete things. You can change things. The words aren't sacred until you actually publish it. So
Yeah. Well said.
Well, see, then that's when you change your 2nd edition just slightly, so that way you can start the comment wars on Reddit forums.
Yeah.
Which is the canonical one, the revision or the original?
The special edition.
Yeah.
Go back and do it
first. Sorry.
Yeah. On shot for absolutely.
Digitally remastered.
So you're an artist, Will, I will. I'm not. I like to do creative things. I wish I could draw. I have some talent, but I have discovered self-publishing my books that probably the most expensive thing hobby out of this, and the thing that I've grown to love the most is my covers. I mean, working with my cover artist and finding a cover artist is just, that's the thing that's the most fun for me. That and drawing maps.
I like maps.
I do my own maps, and I can spend way too much time doing my maps, and I have. But it's also helped with story building too.
Oh, absolutely.
Help with world building.
And readers love when they open a book and see a map that like you can tell a lot of love and care has been put into, and it's like, oh, this is going to be a deep story. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for map makers. It is not easy. And
I used to hand draw my maps, and I used to do my maps for D&D games in Paint, Microsoft Paint, which is horrible. But it's
there's a certain charm to like MS Paint drawings though.
Yeah.
Like
I've still got files of old Paint maps that I printed out over the years, and they're horrible. Now I Incarnate, it's just like, oh wow.
Yeah, I use Incarnate too. It's great.
Oh, it's the best money I've ever spent for a year subscription. Incarnate, it's just great.
Yep, same here. That's what I built mine on. Here, I'll show you a picture of. There's my map that I built on Incarnate.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did all mine, and I got them, and I printed them through Canva. I'm giving all these plugs to these places. Maybe they'll send some money.
Yeah.
But yeah, I printed them on Canva, and it's like, got them in the mail. It's like, oh my God, these are beautiful. So now I got to get them framed. So now I have to go somewhere else and buy frames. But now I put them in frames. It's like, oh wow, these are really cool. So yeah, my wife's about to kill me. He's like, that's a lot of money. Like, yeah, it is, but it's worth it.
Yes.
Yeah. Funny that you mentioned covers though, because as I'm sure everybody who follows me or Josh on social media, from all of the book promoting, I actually did the cover for his latest book.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. I showed it to Jay before you came on.
Yeah, I'm a cover art junkie. I wish I had the skills to do it myself, but it's cool to work with artists and then see them bring your work to life. It's like, oh wow, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And how much of it with your covers, like how much of that are you involved with? Like, do you give your cover artist like the idea of what you want, or do you just kind of have kind of a broad feeling that they're trying to capture? Or what's that process been for you when you're trying to hire a cover artist?
It's been fun. The cover artist I work with, his name's Christian Bentolin. He him my book. I gave him the description for the first book in the Sphere Saga. I sent him that. Then he said, well, give me some idea of some covers of you that you like, some things that you like. So I did kind of a mood board with that and sent it to him. Several of them were his covers, several were other covers of different artists that I liked, just so he could get the kind of style and idea of some of the things that I was looking for. And we kind of went from there. I had fun with that. I don't do much with Pinterest, but I kind of did almost a Pinterest type thing with a mood board. Would find, this uniform is cool, a cool design. I like this type of hairstyle, that kind of thing, and just sent him all that stuff, and we just had a conversation back and forth, and I told him, I said, the only thing that has to be there, you have to come up with the sphere. The sphere has to be in the background, and go from there. He did, and he sent me the first draft, and I did cry. I'll admit, I'm a man, and I cried.
Nothing wrong with that. When you see something that you helped bring to life, really brought incarnate, like that would bring me to tears.
It was just incredible. And there were some tweaks and some changes that needed to be made, but nothing major. And he just nailed it. And then we went to the second cover, and there's a military uniform on the character in that. And he said, well, what kind of uniform do you want? And I said, and I went, searched on the internet, found a couple different styles. He found something that fit and was perfect for it. And I had even described a pendant that was on this character's uniform to him, and he created it himself and it looked different than I described in the book. So I went back and changed it. In the book description and actually modified that and added a scene that pendant, because it was just so cool that he put that little touch in there.
That's awesome.
Actually, I did that with the third book too. The cover on the third book, the character on the third book is on the cover is the same character from the first book, but she's grown and she's developed, her powers have developed, and she's actually a couple of years older. I said, well, she needs to look older, she needs to look a little bit different, but she also needs to have a different costume, a combat oriented way of, and I didn't know what to tell him as far as that went, but he came up with this wild outfit that just fit perfectly. And I added a scene in the book on, because it was totally out of character for this girl, but I added a scene where she's discussing it with a friend of hers. She's like, I'm going out on these nightly raids, trying to fend off these wraiths that are attacking the city, and I can't keep wearing these dresses that keep getting in the way. And they designed this clothing for her, and
that's awesome.
I had to add a scene in the book to fit it. So I mean, working with the artist helps with the story. It helps develop the character.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good collaboration. That's awesome.
Oh, it was, and I just changed the cover for my reader magnet, the prequel novella to this series, and I had him do, because I had developed a really, what I think was bad. He told me it wasn't bad. I'm not sure if he was being nice or not, but I covered for it. It was just something very basic, and we worked on it like 2 or 3 weeks ago, actually, and we did a new cover for it, and it's just awesome. I mean, I told him, I said, it sounds weird, but there are 2 disembodied hands, kind of like Thing from the Addams Family, and they perch on his shoulders, and he put them in there for me on the cover of it, and it's gorgeous. I mean, they just bring it out. It just looks cool, and that's awesome. They even have different personalities. One has rings and one has painted fingernails.
Nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's really cool. It's interesting. As somebody who is a visual artist, like, we can do pretty much everything. Like, it doesn't have to. Once you get to a certain skill set, like, reality no longer matters. We can make whatever we want.
Right.
I hear you, Thanos. I hear you.
I mean, all things in balance. But
as the writer, I had some visions of things that I thought would be cool. And I know I've gotten away from the idea, well, it has to be a scene in the book. And I know that's not the case. And most covers aren't a scene from the book anymore. But I've given him some ideas. I told him, well, here are a couple different settings from the book, from this novella. One of which was, a castle it's carved out of natural crystal. And he just told me, he said, I don't know that I have anything that I can draw from that. I don't have anything in my materials that I can use for that. Because there's something else we can do. So we went back to the drawing board. I told him, so, well, there's a magic lab, there's a wizard's lab in there. His father's a wizard, and one of the covers that he had done has something similar. And I said, yeah, let's look at that. And he did, and it looks nothing like the other work that he'd done, but it had the same kind of orientation and style on it, and he used that for it, and I love it. It's perfect.
That's awesome.
That collaboration's a lot of fun.
And I gotta imagine something like, I don't know if you have a very visual imagination or if it's more
I do
verbal thinking.
I do, to my detriment sometimes.
Yeah, but when you're actually able to see something with your actual eyes instead of like in your mind's eye, it does give a whole different bit of tangibility to it.
Oh yeah, by far.
That's really cool.
It's a great part of the process.
Well, Jay, I'm going to make sure that on the video description, we have links to all of your works. So everyone check out the podcast description to the video description here. Check out the Sphere Saga, and also check out Blacktooth, the Blacktooth series, because pirates are awesome. So I want to hear more about that the next time we have you on the podcast.
Yeah, that sounds good. That's my kids.
Yeah.
Oh, it's for kids?
Yeah, that's a children's book series.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it actually sprang from a bedtime story I wrote for my daughter because I was sick of reading princess stories.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, pirate stories are way cooler.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so where can our audience find your book? Are you just online or?
Yeah, everything's on Amazon. It's all there. Everything's in Kindle Unlimited too. So if anybody are Kindle Unlimited users,
awesome.
Kindle Unlimited. It's all on Amazon. My website's JS plus my name spelled out.net. Everything else, all the books are on Amazon. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Facebook, where I do most of my social media posting. Old guy. I don't like tweets, and all that stuff. Old guy. I don't like. I do have Twitter and Instagram and that kind of stuff, but I usually kind of cross post.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's cool. We'll put all your social media links in the description so everyone can find you. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was a great conversation.
I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being on Nerds and Friends.
All right. Thanks.